Well, as we end Youth Month, we speak to the Professor of African Politics at UNISA, Prof Maphunye, who is one of the student leaders of the class of June 16, 1976 Soweto uprisings. A very good evening to you, Prof, and thank you so very much for joining us here on SABC News.
Good evening to you, Flo, and good evening to your viewers, and thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome, sir. When you look at the challenges of today's youth and reflect upon yours and how difficult it was a time for you, are you somewhat, disappointed that, things are still not easy necessarily for today's youth? Because one would have thought that this is what you fought for, that, those coming after you don't have to, deal with struggles as you did.
Absolutely. That was the essence of today's seminar, workshop, which was held at the National Heritage Council in Pretoria, at basically to recognize the legacy of C.H. Maphunye. Most of the speakers, including myself, were actually very, very concerned that what you have just said just hits the nail on the head. Many of the problems that the youth of today, more than 40 years after June 15, 1976, remain, a sore point even for them today. And yet we face those problems thinking that one day they would, South African youth, especially black youth, would not have to face a similar situation.
Yeah. And let's talk about the importance of, I'm sure you saw the clip that we played just before speaking to you, the importance of, creating opportunities. I think one of the biggest issues that the youth is complaining about is the fact that there are no jobs, there are no opportunities. And in that particular clip we played before talking to you, we saw the youth actually quite excited and happy about the fact that some sort of opportunities were being presented to them. And I mean, these sort of opportunities, how significant are they in terms of addressing some of the social ills, that plague our society, which many blame on the youth?
They are significant in a sense that we need to acknowledge and commend the efforts being done to address the plight of the youth. However, Flo, as many South African youths who are in this situation of disadvantage and disappointment would attest, it is very, very minimal, being done. That's number one. Number two, many of them also complain that actually they are not able to target them where they are. It is very sad that normally we talk about June 16, 1976, only in the June month. And maybe that's why we have said we have this June month. Many of the speakers today were actually concerned about this. We think that once we start saying June month is youth month, it looks like the other 11 months we forget about the youth, and therein lies the issue. We end up having to just go through the motions and rhetoric. So nothing could be said that stresses the fact that the youth are very, very worried that we seem to be speaking past them. So much needs to be done than we have today.
Would it be fair, Prof, to say that, it's also the responsibility of the youth to help themselves and to fight for themselves? I mean, if we look at what you, as the youth of 1976 did, you took the bull by its horns and you fought a very, the apartheid government, to a very brutal government and its forces who ended up, in fact, killing some youths. Would it be fair to say that in some instances the youth themselves have to, take the bull by its horns and necessarily fight themselves out of the ills that plague society and some of the problems that the youth face today?
Absolutely. Bob Marley, in one of his songs said, "Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our mind." In other words, the youth of today, just like us in 1976, also had their work cut out for them. They also need to stand up and take the baton from us and generally just determine their future and not cry for handouts or anything. Not that they are crying for handouts, but some of them appear to be looking for someone to just keep them in this dependency stage. Unfortunately, dependency also breeds other consequences which are not very, very good, which do not augur well for youth development and national development. So yes, I agree with you. They need to stand up and take the baton and move ahead, face their own struggles.
And Prof, how would they begin, in terms of addressing some of these challenges that they are faced with? I mean, in your time, I suppose that you all gathered and decided you would march against, some of the laws that had been put forward, for example, being taught in Afrikaans, for example. How should the youth then protest their concerns? I mean, we've seen things like, fees must fall movements. We've seen students rising really about some of their concerns, as Namali protests, for example. But, when you're speaking about the issue of jobs and opportunities, where should they begin? Are we talking more protests? Are we talking, I suppose that the youth is, in fact, trying very hard to be heard when it comes to voicing their concerns on the issue of job availability. Where should they start?
At the seminar today, I mentioned that we do not have to prescribe any strategies or any ways of challenging their own situation today, similar to how we dealt with the apartheid system. They have their work in front of them. They have to decide what strategies to take. But now that you are talking about issues such as employment, the idea is to make sure that as they go through the motions, especially of education, they must make sure that they are not just thinking about becoming employees of a company or some, employment center of sorts, but they must actually also be thinking about how they themselves can become tomorrow's employers, to employ other people, in order to create opportunities for employment. Yeah. Apart from that, they must also think about using the skills that they would have acquired. We've got FITAs, we've got tertiary education, we've got all these other educational opportunities, and we do not want this thing called the so-called unemployed graduate or unemployed learners, matriculants, and so on. They must also try and find innovative ways